Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Paranormal Addicts Podcast. As usual, I am your host, Kent, and tonight we have a special guest. We have Chris McKinnell as a guest I've been looking forward to. Chris has spent much of his life surrounded by the paranormal. As the grandson of Ada Lorraine Lauren, Chris grew up with a perspective on the field that very few people could ever have. But tonight isn't simply about being the grandson of Ed and Lorraine Warren. Chris has also spent decades developing his own understanding of the paranormal and explaining much bigger questions, including consciousness and the nature of reality. We're going to get to know Chris, talk about the legacy of his grandparents during the year in which they would both have been turned 100. And later we're going to dive into Chris's own theories about consciousness, reality, and what that might mean for the understanding of the paranormal. So, Chris, thank you for joining us tonight, and welcome to the Paranormal Addicts Podcast.
Thank you so much, Ken. I appreciate it.
Before we get started, talking about your grandparents, paranormal investigating, consciousness, or any of that, let's start with you. Who is Chris? Tell the viewers who you are.
I am the director of the Warren Legacy Foundation for Paranormal Research. We carry on the work of my grandparents all over the world. Our services are free and confidential, and I have an extraordinary team of capable, talented, selfless professional volunteers who will drop everything at a moment's notice to help people in trouble. So that is the one thing I can say I am most proud of in this world, is those good people. So if you need help and you're listening to us tonight, go to warrenlegacyfoundation.com and we're there to help you.
That's one thing that makes me respect you even more than I already did before, is the fact that your purpose is to help people and the services are free. I've often said I've been doing this for almost as long as you have. I've been doing it since I claim 92, but I actually went on my first investigation in 86. So, for a couple of 24 hours anyway. And that's one thing, I say I got into this for the sole purpose of helping people. And of course, I never charge for my services. I even tell people, I was like, if you're in contact with a team that does charge, hang up, because there's plenty of legitimate teams that would do it for free.
Absolutely. I just had a woman in the Netherlands contact me, and she has spent over $20,000 because people have convinced her that she's got some kind of demonic attachment, and then they make her pay to get rid of it, and they keep making her pay every month, and it's a scam. It disgusts me. Our work, what we do, is confidential. We don't advertise who we help. Obviously, if people, forgive me. If people, go public themselves, I feel it's okay to discuss it, but I highly recommend that people don't do that. I've seen the damage that comes from publicity.
Yeah, and I'm the same way. Like, if we go and investigate like Ravenly Hill or Berkshire, like a pay to investigate place, we do do some publicity with it. But if we do residential cases, that's what I call them. If we do a residential case, we don't put where we're going. We don't put it on YouTube. We don't go live, because the sole purpose of that is to help the family. It's not about the publicity and making it into a circus. It's about helping the family.
Exactly. I've never actually, I've never paid to do an investigation myself. I've never gone to these things. I remember I've been doing this since 1981. Back when I started, we would walk into a haunted location like a castle or something, and we could happily do an investigation. This new phenomena that's taking place, where everybody is charging an arm and a leg so you can go in and use your spirit box or what have you to basically titillate yourself. That I just don't understand. If I'm not there to help, I don't have a reason to be there.
So I'm not going to. I mean, we're friends, so we'll just talk openly. The way I look at it, especially with my team, when we go to places like that, and we don't go to the expensive ones. There's some places that charge $1,500, $2,000. There's
I
no
know.
point. There's no point in that. But but if we go to a location where we have to pay, we use. I tell my team, I was like, this is training. This is so you can learn to use. I use it as training. To me, it's not actually an investigation. It's more of a training ground, if that makes sense.
It actually is more ethical than doing it at the expense of a family. Absolutely.
Exactly. And yeah. And another thing that we have in common, going back through your research and stuff that I've studied, we both, I mean, we both use religion and Christianity in our investigation, but we respect the other views too. And that way is even in my team. Like I got different religions on my team. I got people that well, Wiccans, everything, mediums and everything. So use it all together. And like I told you last week or the week before when we were first talking about you being on the show. I actually have a little tie-in with your granddad. Ed. Because when I first got started in the paranormal, when I first started deciding I was going to investigate, because I was born with abilities. I don't remember a time in my book I write that most people's they remember their first Christmas, their first bike, that kind of stuff. I remember the first time I saw an apparition, and that was when I was 5 years old, so and I consider that a gift now. 5-year-old me probably didn't consider it a gift, but I consider it a gift now. And when I turned 12, that was when I decided I was going to learn how to use my abilities to help people and to research. Well, I'm from Western Kentucky, so not even the Bible Belt, but we're like the capital of the Bible Belt. I think we have more churches per capita than we have people, and so I didn't really have anybody that I could turn to to learn, to be a role model or whatever. So we didn't even have, not that I consider it a good source of training, but we didn't even have ghost hunters, ghost adventurers. We had none of that.
Well, nobody should use that crap as a teaching tool. Please. Oh my God.
What we had was one Friday a month, and you remember this because we're in the same age group. We had one Friday a month. We had Robert Stack on Unsolved Mysteries. We do the unexplained, and then we had the library. So that was my lifeline, was the library. I'd go to the Paducah McCracken County Library and the Heath Middle School Library and check out every book I could on paranormal, ghosts, everything. And a lot of those books, especially back in then, because like I said, that was 85, 86, 87. Most of the books back then that I could get a hold of were mostly by your granddad, and so they became like, I don't like using the term too much, but they became like my Bible. They were my lifeline. So I actually became pen pals with your grandfather, and I still have several of his letters. I got one hanging on the wall behind me, which he just encouraged me to keep exploring, keep investigating, and told me if I ever needed his help. He actually gave me the phone number, and told me if I ever needed help, don't hesitate to call him. So that meant a lot to a 12-year-old kid, So,
Of course. Well, I'd like to clear up a couple of things. Number one, I'm not a Christian. I am a pastor, but I'm a pastor without any religion whatsoever. One thing I have seen, and I've been lucky. I've lived on 5 continents. I've had cases on 6 continents. I've had almost 11,000 cases in my life. And I've seen that God doesn't care about your religion. God only cares about your heart. Are you putting your faith into action with empathy and compassion for others? If you're doing that, you're on the right path. Far too many people, they stop looking at the destination and they're only focused on their own footpath, and they're not seeing where they're supposed to be going, and their path becomes the destination. And that's a shame, because that isn't what we're supposed to be taught.
Agreed.
The foundation, if you look at our logo, it has about a dozen icons and symbols from different religions all over the world, because that's something I learned from my grandparents. They were very Roman Catholic, but they embraced all religions, and they never forced their religion on anyone else. If they went into a home with a Jewish family, they would go in with a rabbi. If it was a Shinto family, they had a Shinto priest that they would get a hold of, and they would go in with him. That was our way, and that's the way I've always been as well. As for their books, they didn't write any books. That's something people get confused about. Those books were written by several different authors, some of which were fantastic. And others were so embarrassing to me that I had them remove my name, and I said, I'm not going to be in the public anymore. And I wasn't for decades. I was like, no, I will not be associated with this. And it wasn't my grandparents' fault. We gave the right information to this particular author. I was the lead investigator on the case, and they turned it into this unbelievably lurid thing that I really was embarrassed by. And no. For me, this is all about the people we serve. And we're dealing with real people's lives. This isn't clickbait. It's not drama. The ridiculousness that I see in the paranormal community, where everybody's fighting everybody else, trying to be the big kahuna, all you're doing is you're undermining the faith of anybody who actually needs help. Why would they trust any of us with that kind of ridiculous immaturity out there? I expect, and I know I get with my people, we are the adults in the room. We're just there to help, period. And we have a certain code of ethics, code of conduct, which includes, if you don't know what to do, you get help. You don't just give up. You don't just run away, and you don't make things up.
Yeah, and I agree with all that. I mean, I don't even claim I don't claim a denomination, or I believe, like you said, it's about having a relationship with God. That's what it's all about. It's about helping people. It's not about whether you're Jewish, Baptist, Catholic, Methodist, whatever. That's what separates the religion, is when you put denominations and beliefs. And a lot of denominations teach their church doctrine more than they teach actual words of God. So yeah, and so I definitely believe like that. And I've only been on like 500 cases, so I'm a little bit behind you, Chris. But I mean, I've been on enough that I understand. It's our job to help them, and if and like you said, if we can't, we find somebody that can. You don't just leave them, and you don't over exaggerate the case and scare the homeowners. Like I personally know of a case of a team that I no longer associate with because of this and other things they did, but they personally told this 80-year-old woman in Memphis, Tennessee, that she had 2 portals in her house and 4 demons, and they couldn't do anything to help her.
Yeah.
Why did they do this? Because they wanted to be a TV show. Actually, he don't even want to be a TV show. He wants to be a TV producer. He thinks he wants to be Zach Baggas. That's what he wants to be. And like you said, that's part of what's wrong with the field. And we would definitely get in that later. Yeah, and I also like the point that you made, and I'll clarify a little bit too, because I did say books that your granddad wrote. He didn't actually write them, like you said. They're his stories given to another author, and the books that I read at 12 years old were all good. I've read some since, which is probably the same one you're talking about. That I was like, that's the most garbage I've ever read in my life.
In a dark place. In a dark place. It's
Yeah.
unbelievably.
So, and yeah, so yeah, I think, and and that's when people ask me what the difference in the paranormal field is now and when it was in the 80s and 90s. I tell them, to me, the biggest difference is back in those days, we actually all worked together. There was actually a community. We were all trying to help everybody and trying to find the truth. And now, and that might have been 12-year-old me looking with a blinder. I'll give you that. But I mean, it was a lot better then than it is now. Now you got everybody thinking that they should have a place on a pedestal, and and it's not, and para-unity does not exist. It never existed.
I don't like the idea of para-unity. I dislike that idea completely. That's like saying, yeah, I want to be a surgeon. Okay, here's the scalpel. Go practice. No, I think if people need to do the actual research, they have to learn some basic skills first, like therapy and psychology, and maybe some quantum physics and structural mechanics of a home, and even electrical engineering. There should be some actual disciplines in your team to eliminate all the natural explanations first, because even when the paranormal is involved, there's going to be an underlying issue that's making that manifest in a negative way. And if you don't take care of that underlying issue, then that's going to just make it come back again and again and again. I do want to go back to my grandparents' books again, though, as well as their old videos and everything else, because you're making a good point here, and I want to clarify something. Some of those books were excellent in their time, but don't use those, and don't use their old videos as a way of learning, because the work has gone so much farther since then. By the way, who is Shannon Chris McKinnell? The one with Shannon Chris McKinnell. What does that mean?
That's me that falling asleep there.
Oh,
That's me that editing it right. Here we go. That's me combining my last week guest and you.
Okay, I was wondering. I saw that. I was like, maybe he thought somebody else was coming on tonight.
No. Shannon was my guest last week. And,
okay.
Yeah. So that's what that was. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So, but what I wanted to say was, when you're looking at those, understand that my grandparents, they were constantly learning, and their viewpoints changed over the years many times. And you don't want to be looking, for instance, if you were studying medicine, you wouldn't want to look at a textbook from 1978, like The Demonologist, and think that you're learning up-to-date medical practices. You're not. So please, yes, enjoy them. They're good entertainment, some of them. But you're not seeing things very clearly, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that, everybody has to understand about your grandparents, even the ones that want to start drama over them. They have to understand when they were doing this, they didn't have the resources and stuff that we have now. They were basically figuring it out as they went along.
Right.
So I think that's a very good point. Like you said, and I think if your granddad was right there with you right now, he would say the same thing. What I did in the 80s, 90s, is not what needs to be done now. We were doing the best that we knew how to, but now, like you said, we know more. We've came on, and I love the education standpoint, because Wayne Kirby, when he was my guest on the show, he actually said that that's the number one thing that he would tell anybody in the field is, as long as you're in this field, you always have to be learning. If you stop learning, you need to not be in the field anymore. And and I've actually adopted that to my own thing, and I actually put it in the paranormal field. You're either green and growing, or you're ripe and rotting. And I don't want to be rotting, so I always want to be growing. I actually stole that quote from Ray Kroc and kind of rewrote it, but that's okay. Yeah, I mean, I like how you talk about, you need to understand basic mechanic, everything. My team, when we do a residential, we actually have there's actually a procedure. I mean, we do it the same way always. And then if we find something we need to react to, we'll react to it. But we always do a phone interview first, and I personally do the phone interview, and then we do an in-person interview. If I think that they need our help and that we can help them, we do an in-person interview, and both the phone interview and the in-person interview are the same questions. It's actually a sheet. And then when we do the in-person interview, it's always me, one of my team leads, and then two other people. That way, me and Jill, we're asking the questions. I'm asking the questions. Jill's taking notes, and then we're also videotaping it and voice recording it. And then the other two people, they're doing a mini investigation to get baseline readings. So they're getting EMF readings. They're getting all that. So, and that way we know if there's old wiring in the house that's putting off 120 EMF, that that may be part of the issue. We know all that going in, and then we ask the hard questions during the interview too. We ask about drug and alcohol use. We ask about religious beliefs. We ask if they've tried any occult practices. We ask
Mold is another one to ask about.
That's a good one. That is a real good one. We ask them if they know the history of the property, and then from there, then we go in and help them. And I think it's important for people to understand that you kind of briefly stated it earlier. When we go in after we investigate and we help them, we don't just abandon them after that. We keep checking on them and making sure that they, everything's still good, and if they need any more help, And I've actually made the statement before, and I think I made it earlier, and I still believe it. If you're not in the paranormal field to help people, you're in the paranormal field for the wrong reason.
Exactly. I don't even like the paranormal field. I really don't. I'm not in this to be rich or famous. I'm in this to help people and empower people. Yes, the paranormal can be absolutely deadly. That's a fact. But electricity can be deadly too. And when you learn how to use it properly, it can light up the world. The same is true for the paranormal. When we let go of our fear, when we start to understand what we're actually dealing with, then it can change your perspective. You still should be respectful. But those footsteps you're hearing outside your bedroom door in the middle of the night are not the devil. The devil's not going to be so gentle. Not that I believe in the devil, but if you're having something truly negative, over the top manifest, it's not going to be coming on tiptoes. That's the old lady that used to live in the house, or it's your grandfather come to check on you at night. And that's all it is. It's a beautiful experience that your fear is turning into something else. Having said that, look, yes, I've had about 11,000 cases, most of which I will say are solved in one or two conversations. It's that simple. It's a misunderstanding. It's nothing to be worried about, and we can move on. But on the others, I have to say, I have never met anybody who has had as much, has witnessed as much as I have. And I am not saying that to build myself up. In a way, I'm saying that I understand why people would not believe me, because what I've seen, what I've experienced is far greater than anybody else I've ever heard of. I mean, my cousin's a guy named John Zaffis. I had investigated a poltergeist house in Tewksbury, Massachusetts. 2 years after it was solved, we went back there. And it was because I was working with the family to create a support group for other families going through this type of trouble, and they wanted to help. So they allowed us to spend the night, and we were young, and we kicked the 10-year-old out of his bed. He's sleeping in a sleeping bag on the floor, and we're in sleeping bags on his bed. And we turn out the light, and my cousin starts yelling at me because he thinks I'm kicking the bed to fool around with him. I'm not doing a thing. So we turn off the light again, and he starts screaming at me, "Chris, stop!" And the bed picks up, flies 10 feet across the room, smashes down, and breaks into pieces. The funny thing is, no poltergeist activity had taken place for 2 years before that, and nothing ever happened again. What was really going on there? The only thing I can think of is the energy that had been built up in that home over years of conflict. The child had tapped into that subconsciously with his own anger that he wasn't in his own bed, and he throws across the room. That says an awful lot about our power.
Yeah. I mean, I have to say, I have never experienced anything like that. And, yeah.
I laughed when it happened. I thought it was the coolest thing I'd ever seen in my life. My cousin, on the other hand, he made like the road runner, and he left smoke trail going down the stairs. It was funny because the lady of the house, her name was actually Lorraine. She was sitting at the kitchen table with her back to us, and she was smoking a cigarette and having a cup of coffee. And John came barreling down the stairs and got to the kitchen. She turned around, she looked at him, and she said, "So, you believe me now?" I thought it was the funniest thing. I loved it.
Yeah.
But it just goes to show the power we're dealing with. I mean, I've had 2 people killed on these cases. Maurice Theriault, the man known as Frenchie in the Nun movies. The Nun is not real. There is nothing real at all about that character. But Maurice was a real man, and he was coming under possession, I believe, by his father. That was originally what my grandfather believed as well, but he changed his mind and thought it was demonic. My grandfather kind of went demon happy in the 70s and 80s. Everything became demonic for him. He was part of that satanic panic. He really got wrapped up in it. He started to come out of that by the 90s, though. And Maurice was coming under terrible attack. His father had been a miserable monster, a truly evil man, and had even killed his wife, Maurice's mother, and himself while Maurice listened on the phone. And Maurice eventually came under possession, shot his wife, blew her arm off, and then took his own life. That was just one of 2 deaths. And look, I've had the gas turn on my stove 3 nights in a row because I was about to go on a case. I had simpler things happen, like the TV and the computer turning on at 2:00 in the morning after I'd arranged an exorcism for a lady in Tennessee. My wife at the time, she was all excited and she wanted to go see. I said, "No, just ignore it." And I said, "Cut it out." And 20 seconds later, it stopped. Of course, the computer didn't start again for 6 months, which really upset me. But other than that, everything was fine.
I think that's a good point. People don't, para-pop culture, as I like to call it, the TV shows, even the movies, all that stuff. I guess even some of the podcasts, not mine, but some of the podcasts, they make it look like, everything is just, whatever. And, people don't realize we really don't know what we're messing with. The 2, I have 2 cases that really stick with me. They're residential, so I don't, the names and locations have been changed to protect it.
Of course.
But one I have permission to talk about. First of all, it happened back in like 1996, so it's been a few years, and but it's actually the case that sticks with me more than any. Um, if I've ever dealt with a demonic case, it was this one. Would I most of the time I tell people that demonic cases make up less than 1%. I'm not going to be a hypocrite and say that there's not demonic cases because I trained under Bishop Long, for demonology. So, if I trained and then say that's kind of hypocritical, but most of the time we're dealing with like a malicious spirit, like you said, like with his father, and a malicious spirit is basically if you were a dickhead when you were alive, you're going to be a dickhead when you're dead. So,
Exactly.
so anyway, so this case, it was in southwest Indiana, and I was living up there at the time outside Louisville, Kentucky, on the Indiana side. They like to call it the sunny side of Louisville. I lived on that side because rent was cheaper. But I was up there because at that time I was a pro MMA fighter, so I was living up there fighting out of Louisville. But I also did paranormal because that's my calling, and so we got a call from whatever you want to call it, either the grandparents or the in-laws of this guy. The case had already been over the news. It was a murder-suicide. The guy killed his kids, his wife, and then himself. And it was known as, on the TV station, it was known as the satanic murder, because the backstory was, and it's even in the police report, because of course I got the police report and researched all that before we did the case. But he lost his job at John Deere and became really depressed, and he turned to alcohol and drugs, and eventually started practicing occult practices and devil worship, attempting to anyway. I'll put it that way, because I actually found his journal later and was able to read what he was doing. So basically he was messing with stuff he didn't know, but he was trying. Let me put it that way. So that's what we knew going in. Also, what we knew, what I tell people now, looking back, 30 years later, the case was probably still too fresh. It had only been 3 months since the murder-suicide. So we probably should have allowed a little bit more downtime. But when you have a 55-year-old man and woman hysterically calling you, wanting you to get some answers, you go. And so we go up there. And what was really interesting about this getting there was like basically a horror story, like Stephen King book or whatever you want to say. So to get there, we had to go underneath the famous Crying Baby Bridge, the one every town's got one, where the mom threw the baby off the bridge and now she haunts the bridge. So we had to go underneath that. That's most of the time those were just urban legends, but still we had to go underneath the bridge. And then when we got to the house, catty cornered from the house, probably 90 feet, was an abandoned 1800 cemetery. And so the neighbor had decided to take a bobcat and knock down the house, or attempt to knock down the house, I should say. And so when we got there, the house was kind of half leaning, and so we crawl in there, and as soon as we crawl in, I mean, it was like, you just get that feeling, your hair stands up on your arms, whatever you want to call it. Where the police tape was still there, the blood stains were still there. So we made our way to the kids' room, and he shot the kids while they were asleep. So their room was basically, blood stain on the bed, but it wasn't like, anything. Well, we made our way slowly to the master bedroom. And then when we got to the master bedroom, depending on which version of the story you believe from the police report and the news coverage, he made his wife get down on her knees, and he shot her that way. So, some people say that he made her perform sexual acts on him before, so that's the gray area. But anyway, he made her get on her knees and shot him that way, and then he shot himself in the head. So that room, for some reason, when we went in there, I kept being drawn to the wall, just the wall. And we finally decided to move the dresser um, because because we didn't see anything, but I kept being drawn to that wall. So we moved the dresser, and we moved the dresser. He had cut out it made like a little makeshift door in the paneling, and we pulled it open. That's where we found his journal, and he actually wrote about the suicidal thoughts, about the thoughts of the murder, about the devil worship he had attempted. He promised he tried to work out a deal with the devil that if he killed his wife and kids, that he would be able to be successful again. I mean, the guy was crazy.
Did you give that to the police?
We did give it. I did. I most definitely gave it to the police. And then after we was drawn back, after we left that area, I was drawn to the closet. There was a big walk-in closet. This house was originally. A lot of people don't remember this, but back apparently in the 60s and maybe the 70s, you could buy houses for sirs. They were kits, and you just built the house for the kit. This was one of those. So it had the big walk-in closet in the bedroom. So I was drawn to the walk-in closet, and when we got in the closet, again we found in the carpet there was a cutout 5x5 square in the carpet and the padding. So when we peeled that back, there was an attempted pentagon.
So it sounds like the police didn't do a very good job of actually investigating anything.
They did not do a very good job, in my opinion. But anyway, so I turned that. We got that all that information to the police. But the main, I came away with two things that I was able to tell the grandparents, the mother, whatever you want to call them. I was able to realize that the kids had been able to cross over and go wherever they went. They was no longer trapped there. So, and that's really what they wanted. So, and I was able to confidently tell them that. But that story still sticks with me. And then the other one was in Tennessee, and we got a call from this Mexican lady, Hispanic lady, and her husband actually ran the taco food truck in the area, and their daughter had been being harassed by spirits. So especially with dealing with a kid, it became a priority. So we got down there quickly, and it ended up being an interesting case because once we did research on the location, there was two things that stuck out about the location. First, it was the whole neighborhood was where there was a big Civil War battle, and then the other thing that stuck out is that in the 1951 to 1957, it was a church where the preacher ended up being hung for molesting small children. So anyway, long story short, because it was a very long case, it's one of those cases though where the baseline pays off. Because when we was doing the baseline, the first thing we got is their Wi-Fi box was putting off an EMF of 225. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I'm not saying that you don't have something here, but your EMF box is making you think things too. I'm like, 225 is unreal. But what we finally figured out, because we did finally encounter the spirit, and we found out it was a spirit of the preacher, and he was actually targeting the little girl. We actually first encountered him in the basement, but he wouldn't. When we was in the basement, he wouldn't let us confront them or whatever you want to say. He wouldn't let him. He wouldn't let us get rid of him. He wanted us on his. I guess he wanted us on his territory. So we ended up having to crawl into the attic, and so that stuck with me because that was a case where I saw the little girl was terrorized not only at home, but the spirit followed her to school and tortured her at school too.
Do you mind if I ask you some questions?
Go ahead.
Well, let's go to the previous case first. How did you determine that the children had passed over?
Honestly, it was just it was a combination of a feeling and the fact that I asked if the kids were there, and I was they wasn't. So it's hard to explain. It's kind of like just like a calm. You know what I'm saying? Like I can sense. That's one of my gifts is I can sense when there's a spirit there, and and when I get a calm, that usually means that they're not there.
Okay. Yeah, I'm a psychic, and I'm a medium, but I don't trust myself at all without evidence. That's why I'm asking. I'm not trying to be,
No, that's fine.
I'm genuinely trying to understand your process and what you're doing here. And what about this minister? How did you determine he was actually involved at all?
Because we had enough information on him. The interactions that we were getting in the basement were like signatures from when he was alive. Like, like for instance, the basement of the house used to be the basement of like the basement of the church where they would have like the community dinners, and he was known to turn off the light and slam the door when he wanted to leave, and like so he would do that, and then like when we started asking him questions, at first he wanted to use the flashlight method, which I'm not a big fan of the flashlight method, but you have to go with what the spirit wants to use. They if they choose to communicate with you, you use whatever they choose to communicate with you. So
Right.
So they would yeah, and so and when I do the flashlight trick, I do use a mag light. So it's this. It can't be manipulated as easy. So it's more trustworthy than yeah. So
You'll have to forgive me. I don't even know what that is. I'm old school. I don't use any tools at all other than my iPad.
So a flashlight method is basically what it says. You just basically ask the spirit to turn the flashlight on and off.
Oh, okay.
And, yeah, I mean, and that's the reason it's important what kind of flashlight you use, because like if you get like a Dollar General store sliding one, that could anything can make that slide. You know what I'm saying? So that's why it's kind of important to use like a mag light, because they're not cheap, but I mean, if you're going to use good tools, you have to pay for it. So yeah, and that's how he chose to communicate with us, and I actually had a friend of mine from the other side of Kentucky with me on that case, because I determined that my team wasn't equipped for that kind of investigation. So I had brought in somebody with a trusted friend that was also trained, and because that's one thing about me is like we discussed earlier, you have to know this stuff. So I actually do have a degree in parapsychology from West Georgia University, and I got 2 degrees in theology, one from Louisville Bible College and one from Incontinent University, and then I took demonology training under Bishop Long in the old Catholic Church. And I'm not Catholic, but that's where the training came from. And for the record, for people to ask me, they're like, "Well, why didn't you try your own church?" I did. I most definitely did, but it wasn't available. Matter of fact, one denomination actually looked at me and told me I was crazy. So that's just the way it is. So yeah, that's how we determined it, and then. Yeah, that was an interesting case, because you can go. I mean, like I said, we don't release that video. So like if you go to our YouTube channel, you're not going to see our residential cases. You're going to see our training cases. But I personally have a video, and I can send it to you if you want to see it. While me and Jill's my team lead, because my team's a relatively large team. We have 14 members. So I have team leads to help me. Because it's like wrestling cats sometimes, and so me and Jill were in the parents' bedroom, and and I'm investigating. She's filming, so we have it, and of course we have and we already have REM pods, everything set up. Well, we catch an orb, and people don't start on me that orbs are dust. I've been doing this for 36 years. I know when an orb is dust and when an orb is something. Come on now, I'm not an idiot. So anyway, so we start getting this orb that was like communicating with us. So we were like trying to see, trying to determine what it was, if it was anything. And all of a sudden I get shoved off my feet in the bedroom, and it's on camera. You can just see me thud. And I'm a big guy. I'm not fat, but I'm big. I'm 220 pounds, and and so for something just to push me down, and Jill's in so much shock. She just watches. She doesn't even know what, she can't even react to help me up. She's just, so that happened. And then like from the time we did the in-person interview till we got to the actual investigation, we told, of course, with them being Hispanic, Mexican ethnic group, they were heavily Catholic. I mean, they believed in, that was their religion of choice. So we try to have them help their religion, help them. So we have them light, like the candles, with Mother Mary and everything on them and stuff. And they actually reported that lighting the candles actually increased the activity. And
yeah, antagonizing. Spirits are reactive.
Yep.
They're not necessarily active unless they're human. Then they can choose to interact with you. But other manifestations react to the energy we're putting out. My grandmother taught me this. And if you are antagonizing, or if you're terrified and antagonizing, then yeah, you might get something explosive happening. That's why I always try to minimize fear and give tools for people to take back the power in the home. For instance, one thing that I think everybody should learn is to set spiritual boundaries. It's the same thing as you would do setting personal boundaries in your own life, where, for instance, you're on the street and somebody's getting a little too close to you and you say, hey, buddy, back up. You're invading my space. You do the same thing with a spirit. If I have a spirit come in the middle of the night and try to get a hold of me, maybe turn on the television or knock on my bedroom door, what I say is, no, you don't have my permission. Back off. Go away now. That usually does it, because you're dealing with human beings. And most human beings will respect your boundaries if you are clear about those boundaries. Now, don't be disrespectful. Don't piss them off, but be firm. And they will normally respect that. More often than not, they're not aware that what they are doing is scaring you until you let them know that. If they're bothering the children, you're saying, hey, you're scaring my children. You need to stop. Just stop it now. If you're going to stay in this home, then do it quietly. Do not interact with my family. You don't have my permission. Very clear. If that doesn't work, then you try, if you're a Christian, you try the Christ light. If you're anyone of any faith at all, you can use the white light, which is where you are asking and inviting God to fill you up with his power, his protection, their power, their protection, whatever, and then surround you. And then you surround everything that you love with that same protection. That can be very, very effective, because what you're doing is you're using your free will and a ritual to focus your faith and your intention to something, to summons a power greater than yourself to protect you. I have found that when we use any ritual, it focuses our intentions and we can get a tangible outcome. There are, well, for example, there's a wonderful case in Clegg's Cavern in Australia, where up until the 1850s and for 12,000 years, they were performing the same ritual where they would take a piece of wood, smear it with tallow, whether it was human or animal or even vegetable tallow, fat, and they would suspend it on some twine and put it over a fire, and they would either use that to heal or to curse someone. Why would anybody hold on to the same ritual for 12,000 years unless it was effective?
That's true. That's very
And the
true.
same thing with exorcism. There are exorcism rites in every single religion in the world. I am an exorcist who does not believe in demons. What I believe in are manifestations created through our own energy. These are things that can take on a life of their own, like a poltergeist is another form of this. And this can look like a jinn. It could look like Garuda from Hindu mythology. It can look like the chupacabra. And it can also look like Beelzebub or the devil. More often than not, when we are confronted with something we do not understand, something unknown, we label it and we will give it that face, because once we've labeled it, it has rules that we can impose upon it. Everything that we can label, we can give rules to. And I've seen this time and time again. That says more about us and what we're capable of than anything else. When you study demonology, I have a friend. His name is Mark Robson. He is in Durham, England. He is just finishing up the most scholarly book on demonology. I highly recommend it when it comes out.
I'll definitely check it out.
It is the definitive textbook on demonology, because it's not taking it from one viewpoint. It's cross-cultural and it's cross-disciplinary. So you're looking at it from cultural anthropology, philosophy, theology, and many other, history, and many other sources. For example, the common idea of Satan is really misunderstood. The idea that Satan is the leader of the fallen angels and everything, that's a medieval idea, really. It's misunderstood because first we've got the serpent in the Garden of Eden, and then first century, second century scholars started saying, well, the serpent, that's the devil. That wasn't in the Bible. That's not what it says in the Bible. And the same thing with Satan itself. It was actually the Satan, and that was a spiritual prosecutor. He's only mentioned in the book of Isaiah and the book of Job as a spiritual prosecutor, as a prince of heaven who walks into the throne room of heaven and says to God in the book of Job, you know, I hear this guy Job is your most faithful follower. Let me test him. And God says, go right ahead. Just don't kill him. Do anything else you want. Don't kill him. Even when you get to the New Testament, when Jesus is in the wilderness for 40 days and 40 nights, and Satan comes, he's testing Jesus's faith. He's saying, go ahead, do this, do that. Jump off this cliff. Let the angels catch you. You know, let's have you rule the world. Because he was making sure, in my opinion, that Jesus was going to be ready for what was coming in the following week when he went to Jerusalem. It wasn't until later that we developed this other idea. And this also includes things like Beelzebub. Beelzebub is actually from Baal, who was a Assyrian god, excuse me. We did the same thing with Astarte and turned her into a demon. We take old gods when we move into a new region and we demonized them. So I think it's very important when you study demonology to also study the history of how these things develop. And it tells us more about us and how to deal with these things, because you're never going to see a Hindu demon in a Muslim family, or in the jungles of Colombia, you're not going to get Beelzebub. I've lived in animist societies in West Africa. I've lived with the Kogi people in the jungles of Colombia. And their worldview defines the way they deal with the paranormal. I've gotten to study with a man who was the leader of an entire town of witches in Catemaco, Mexico, a man named Jaguar Negro, or the Black Jaguar. And he practices four different schools of magic: red, white, black, and green. And these predate Christianity, far before Christianity. As a matter of fact, if you look, the origins of witchcraft go back at least 35,000 years, according to archaeological and anthropological evidence. Our ancient ancestors were looking at nature and trying to understand the properties in nature and how to best bring those properties out. And they would use ritual. That's the origin of witchcraft.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fascinating. If you actually look at just the history of Christianity, you could actually, like you said, it all really has to do with faith. I consider myself a Christian, but looking at it from a neutral standpoint and from a historic standpoint, you could see where people just made a new religion based on other religions and just made everything fit together. And I actually have an article that's so Hexa magazine just debuted this month, and I have two articles in the debut issue. But one is actually demonology, I believe, older than Christianity, and I actually go back and talk about the Aztec, the Native American, Roman, all that, and so yeah.
Well, actually, Romans believed in daemons, but daemons were not evil. They were the messengers or the go-betweens between humanity and gods. As a matter of fact, I can't remember if it was Aristotle or Plato who talked about his own demon as a thing that was his inspiration, his what gave him the information that he had to share with people, his wisdom. We have developed a new way of looking at things over time. And I think that's why it's so important to understand these things that you're writing about. I think that's wonderful that you're doing that. By the way, if anybody would like to learn about my research, I wrote a 42-page academic paper. I'm going to be actually sharing that with the Society for Psychical Research in London, which is one of the oldest and most prestigious parapsychology organizations in the world. You can download it for free on my website, chrismckinnell.com, under the research tab. And if you're interested, you can also look at my book, The Warren Legacy, what the paranormal reveals about consciousness and reality. I am trying to change the conversation on the paranormal. It's time for us to let go of the fear and truly start to understand these things in a new way. I am not saying that I have all the answers. I don't. And you'll see that in my research. I am a caseworker. I am a field worker, but I am working with other people from other disciplines, other academics who are helping me to shape my understanding. And I'm always looking, like you, for new understanding. And I'm ready to let go of all of the things I think are true right now if I have evidence to show me it's different. I think that's the only way we move forward, is when we're able to let go of our own beliefs and embrace what the evidence is showing us.
I agree, and and like I said, the reason I have the degrees in theology is because, I was questioned a lot down here in the Bible Belt growing up. I was actually, this is a true story. When I was 12 years old, my grandmother, my Memoir, as I call her, my dad's mom, had a stroke. And we finally got to go visit her. The hospital was in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, St. Francis Hospital. So a 30-minute drive from Cairo, which is where my grandparents were from. We got up there, and we was in the waiting room across, and I went to the vending machine to get a Pepsi free, the only Pepsi product I have ever liked in my life. I was going to get a red can of Pepsi free for the vending machine, and this 60-some-odd-year-old lady that I've never seen in my life, she looked like Neil Carter for Give Me a Break. She walks up to me and she tells me that I'm a tool of the devil and that I'm going to hell because of my gifts.
Oh,
And I was like, well, I don't think you tell a 12-year-old that, but thank you. So at that point, that's when I decided that I needed to find out what my gifts were. So that's why I have the degrees in theology. And I was a youth pastor when I was in Louisville too. That was so when I said I tried to find help within my denomination, I mean it. I mean, I did. I asked the Christian church, I asked the Baptist church, I asked the Methodist church, I asked everybody. And then, so that's the book that I'm writing right now. My first book, the one that I have out already, is called Don't Buy Generic Batteries, and It's Probably Not a Demon. The book that I'm working on right now, the foreword of this book is actually written by Ray Kirby. But the title of the book is Hold On. You're a Christian and a paranormal investigator. How's that work? And that title was actually given to me by Heather Donahue, the actress from the Blue Ridge Project, because that was actually an exact question she asked me last year, and that became the title of the book. And it talks about it from a theological standpoint, but it goes beyond the theological standpoint too. What people have to understand. And it's an uncomfortable subject for a lot of people in Christianity, especially especially some priests, and some preachers. But most of the Christian religion that we get nowadays is a man-made religion. It's
all religion is man-made.
Yeah, exactly. And so and even the Bible that we have, there's other books of the Bible that didn't make it in there for some reason. Like one that even Bishop Long likes to talk about is the Book of Enoch. Book of Enoch is interesting.
Yes.
Yeah. The Book of Enoch is interesting because the Book of Enoch actually takes your genealogy, if that's what you call it, all the way back to the demons and the angels. So that's interesting. But the reason why Enoch didn't make it is basically because, according to Enoch, our sin is because of the demons and Satan. Humans didn't have any part in sin, so that's why Enoch was left out. But so you have Enoch, then you have the book of Judas. There's like 12 books that were left out.
The book of Mary, the book of Thomas. There are many of them. Yes.
Yeah. So so if you look at it from that standpoint, then you have to look at it from one of the commandments is that if you add to or take away from the Bible, you're going to hell. Well, apparently we're all going to hell because we all took away from it. So I mean,
well, the Bible wasn't anything other than a collection of scrolls that people eventually gathered together and tried to figure out what fits together. And that was done by the bishops under Constantine when they turned it into a basically state religion. It's not. And even so, it has been changed over and over again throughout time. I mean, the King James Bible was commissioned. That was commissioned by the man who wrote the first Christian pamphlet on demonology, King James himself. He had gone to a witch trial, and it terrified him. And he became so afraid of witches that it resulted in tens of thousands of deaths of innocent people. This is the kind of stuff that I do write about in my book, but among other things, of course. But what I find interesting is when people say they follow the Bible and the word of the Bible, which Bible? Which one do you follow? Because there are mistranslations in there. There's the mistranslation, suffer not a witch to live. That's not what it says in the original text. It says, suffer not a poisoner to live. That's a big difference.
Yeah, that's just like the book that some Christians like to try to use against paranormal researchers. They try to say that it says, do not talk to the living dead because you don't know. But the actual Hebrew translation, because yes, I studied Hebrew. The actual Hebrew translation says, "Do not talk to the living dead unless you're trained or blessed, because only then will you know." So that's a big difference. Those three words make a big difference. So and yeah, there's so many translations of the Bible, and most translations are paraphrased, which basically means a bunch of people sat together and said, "Well, this is what it means to me." That's so that's not word for word, and
And we ignore huge parts of the Bible, and we cherry pick the parts we want to follow. I today people use Leviticus to demonize certain groups of people, but they ignore the fact that alternating crops are supposed to mean you should be put to death, or that you can sell your daughter into slavery, or you can stone your mother or your brother to death. All of these things are conveniently ignored. And masturbation is called the sin of Onan, and God can strike you dead for that. Um, I just I am not a Christian. I have been lucky enough to study all of the great texts and do it with people who really are experts. And I appreciate the wisdom. I appreciate the guidance that these texts have for us. But they were ultimately written by people who were trying in their own time and in their own cultures to convey their wisdom, and that needs to be taken into consideration.
I mean, basically, I'm not making a case for it because, like I said, because I consider myself a Christian, but you could almost make a case it was like a historical horror movie, like Friday the 13th is preaching against premarital sex. So so yeah, it's interesting, but what I like, I don't really like to, but now I'm educated enough now that I'm dangerous, I guess. So when people come to me and try to say, people come to me and like, "Oh, the Bible doesn't say anything about ghosts." I'm like, hold on. You know who Jesus is, right? I was like, Jesus himself twice, not once, but twice, identified himself as, "I am not a ghost." I was like, so if there was not ghost, why did he say, "I'm not a ghost"? He could have said anything. He could have said, "I'm not Batman." He could have said, "I'm not a Sasquatch." He could have said, "I'm not Wonder Woman." But he specifically said, "I'm not a ghost." The first time is significant because it was to relieve the disciples. The second time is more significant because it was after his resurrection. The first time, for the people out there listening, so you don't think I'm crazy, you can look it up in your Bible, whichever version you want. So go back to when Jesus was walking on the water and he calmed the storm. Matthew and John, if you guys are wondering, the disciples got scared because they thought he was a ghost. And Jesus said, "Fear not, I am not a ghost." That's the first time. The second time, we go back to Jesus has been dead. After 3 days, he arose. He appeared before the disciples. Before doubting Thomas filled his hand and stuff, the other disciples were already like, so Jesus' exact words, this is in Luke and John, were, "Fear not, I am not a ghost. A ghost is not made of flesh and blood, as you see I am."
I know we have to get going, but I want to make one comment about poor Thomas, because it's not fair to call him doubting Thomas, in my opinion, because the other disciples had seen him, had seen Jesus. And then they come out as Thomas is arriving and they tell him the master is here. And of course, he's going to say, "Yeah, right."
Right.
He didn't see with his own eyes. The other disciples had, but he didn't. So calling him doubting Thomas, that's really not fair.
I
It's
agree with
not,
that. I think
he didn't say after seeing Jesus, "I don't believe in you."
he was saying it because other people, he was saying it after hearing it. If we're going to call anybody doubting, why don't we call James doubting? He was Jesus's brother, so he didn't believe until after the resurrection. So we could call him doubting
James.
James. Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, okay, let's move on. we've had some serious topics already, so let's have a little bit of fun and let's do my speed round. Um, the speed round is just 10 questions. Some of them are fun, some of them are serious, some of them apply to you, some of them might not. Just say the first thing that comes to your mind. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Haunted doors, fact or fiction?
What is it?
A haunted door, like Annabelle.
Haunted doll? Do you
Yeah.
remember who you're talking to? I grew up with Annabelle. For
Right.
goodness sake. Yes, they can have tremendous energy, and spirits can actually attach to them. Usually a child or something that wants to use it as a conduit. Usually.
I met Annabelle. Um, I,
Me too.
I got to meet her with Wayne and Ryan Burrow at, last year at Rock Island. That was kind of a bittersweet moment because I was actually supposed to go with you. Yeah,
With me?
but yeah, but
No, I was not going to be there.
no, I was supposed to go with a friend that we lost.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Dan Riviere. I was supposed
Dan
to
Rivera.
yeah. I was supposed to go with Dan. It was supposed to be the first time. Dan was my friend, but we never got to meet in person. We talked on the phone weekly, but we had never got to meet. That was supposed to be the first time that we actually met, and so it was kind of bittersweet. I almost didn't go because of that, but I'm glad I did because I'm glad I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, your go-to investigation snack,
I don't have one.
favorite paranormal show.
I definitely don't have one. No, actually, you know what? I take that back. There is a program that I do like. It's called The Proof is Out There. It's on the History Channel. You can also catch it on YouTube. And what they do is they present the evidence, then they go to a panel of experts to discuss it, and then they come up with their own verdict. And honestly, I think it's well balanced and fascinating. So yeah, that one I would give a thumbs up to.
I have seen that one, and I do like that one. I like the perspective of it because, like you said, instead of just being like para entertainers out
Yeah.
there, it's actually researchers, and instead of just being one, there's a board or committee or whatever you want to call it, so you get more opinions than just.
Yeah, I'm actually upcoming episode on Amityville.
Let's see. This is another one that might not pertain to you, but it's still one of the questions. Coffee or energy drink?
Coffee.
If you could investigate.
I've never had an energy drink in my life.
I'm not. It seems like a lot of investigators are addicted to them. I'm not at that point at all. I may drink if it's like I usually drive straight to the investigation and then back home after 12 hours or whatever, and then like a 6-hour drive home. So if I'm driving home, I may drink one so I don't wreck my car. But that's about it. I don't survive on them like some. I'm like, and my favorite in that case would be Ghost brand energy drink. Now has a 7-Up one that tastes just like 7-Up. So
I haven't lived in the United States since 2019, so I'm out of touch.
yeah. Well, I got 3 teenagers, so they keep me up to date on the energy drinks. So let's see. What were we? If you could investigate with anyone living or deceased, who would it be?
I would love to have another investigation with my grandparents.
Honestly, that is my most popular answer by 4 on this show. By 4. The 4 seasons of that question, and that's like 95% of the answers. So,
with my current understanding and perspective, it would be a much more interesting experience.
Ouija board, game, tool, or portal?
Ouija board is like anything else. It focuses your intention to communicate with spirits, and the energy you put into it is what you will attract. It doesn't matter if you're using pendulum, dowsing rods, cards, or anything else. It's all the same. Spirit boxes, flashlights, as you were using. It's your intention to communicate that matters, and what energy you're putting into that. Are you going through a difficult time? Are you a teenager where everything is raw and you're easily terrified? Then it's dangerous, you know? So yeah, it's all about you and your intention than anything else.
I definitely agree with that. And I like that you use the word intent, because that's what I say all the time. Everything is about intent. Uh, that's one thing that I disagree with Bishop Long on. And he's my, like I said, he's my demonology mentor, I guess. But he was on my show 2 episodes ago, and he actually believes that all Ouija boards are evil. That he's like, if you use a Ouija board, eventually you're going to need his service. That's exactly how he says it. And with all due respect, I think it's more about intent.
I've had about 11,000 cases, and I've only had 12 cases of possession. If you're doing exorcisms every other month, there's something wrong, and maybe it's your understanding. For me, that should not be happening.
And I will say this. I mean, I highly respect Bishop Long, so I'm not. That's one thing. He's not one of these exorcisms that have like hundreds of cases. He's been doing it for 30 years, and he's had 30 cases. So he's right there. And he's not one of those. He's not one of those. I think I read, and I'm not going to say names because it's not with. I read where there's one Roman Catholic priest that before he died, he claimed like 749 cases.
I've had people tell me they had 300 in the past year. And I'm like, are you out of your mind? Did you do any background on any of these people? Or are you just doing deliverances? And
right.
If so, make it clear that there's a big difference.
Right. And that's one thing. I like to, I don't do exorcisms. I'm not an exorcist. I may be a demonologist, but I'm not an exorcist. But whenever it's like one thing I like about what Bishop Long was saying. Before he even considers calling it a position, there's a mental health background check and everything, because a lot of times this is I'm going to call it a fact, because in my 30 years, this is what the truth is pointed to. A lot of times in residential cases, it becomes a mental issue more than it becomes a paranormal issue.
Even when there is a mental health issue, there can be.
There can be, yes.
And you shouldn't allow mental health to rule out the paranormal. That could be the reason it's manifesting the way it is.
Right.
But
yeah,
you have to look for it always.
Yeah. Let me clarify there, because I don't want to come through like saying that just because because honestly, the mental health can be why the paranormal is targeting you. That could be their invite into your world. So yes, they definitely still need help, but you need to know it, because it could be more of a mental issue than a demonic issue.
Right.
Yeah. I'm not belittling anything with mental issue. Trust me, I got my own. I got PTSD complex, from abusive childhood, and then I have social anxiety disorder from my time in the military. So yeah, definitely not belittling anything. I'm just saying you have to know what you're going into. So okay, this one doesn't really reply to you because you only do residential cases. But if you had a bucket list location, where would it be?
Actually, there is a haunted forest in Romania I want to check out. So I'm relocating to Albania in September to do some research, and I'll be there indefinitely. And Romania isn't that far away, so I'll probably go there.
Excellent. Okay, so demon, fact or fiction?
Fiction. Well, no, that's not fair. I want to make it clear what I've shared with you tonight. These are tulpas, egregores, thought manifestations, but they're real. They take on a life of their own. It's like having a multiple personality, but the personality breaks away from you and has a life of its own. But they are reactive. I have never seen them show the wisdom of the ages. They always are simply reactive. Now, they could have some knowledge, but they could be picking that up from others around them. And I always want to say to people, look, if these things were actually fallen angels, why are they going after the most vulnerable among us? Why are they going after the ones who are already lost? Why aren't they going after the general with his finger on the button, or the president or somebody like that? It does not make sense. Especially, why is it they only appear in one form for one culture and in a different form in a different culture? Totally different, acting different. In many of the places in the world, these things are not even considered evil. That's a very Christian thing.
I mean, we could probably debate that too, but I don't think it's really worth debating, because I mean the point is, to me, the bottom line to mine and your friendship is we're both in this to help people. So whatever labels they have, we get through the labels to help them. So that's all that matters. So, but the only thing I would add, the only thing I could say to that, because obviously I've studied all that. Like I said, I have a published article. You could get the Hickson magazine. It's just now available, the debut issue, and I go all the way back to Aztec and I'm 1/7 Cherokee, so I talk heavily about the Native American and Cherokee views of the so yeah. But my belief in why demons choose who they choose is because a misunderstanding in culture, thanks to like Sam and Kobe and stuff, is a demon has to be invited. They can't just attack you. They can't just attach you. You have to allow it to be in.
That hasn't been my experience with possession.
Right. And so yeah, I will say that if there are demons, it's rare. Like you said, 13 cases over thousands and thousands of, yeah, and then and like Bishop Long, 30 cases over 30 years, and I've not seen any in my 30 years that I were actually comfortable labeling as demonic. So you take that, it's not like you see on YouTube and stuff where it's every episode. If those people actually ran into a demon, they would piss their pants. I went blue. I don't know why I went blue. There we go.
I'm still here. Don't worry.
I'm back. All right. So, protection or no protection?
Protection. Of course. You have to use your free will to call on something greater than you for protection.
So, okay. So, this...
your faith is your protection.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. And that's one thing, whether you're a Christian or not a Christian, so from either side of us, it's not me that protects myself. It's my belief in God. For me, God, for whoever your higher power is, it's your belief in them. I don't have any power over this stuff. I'm just, so, all right. So let's talk a little bit about your grandparents. I don't do.
But I have to warn you, I am falling asleep. It's a little later here in Paraguay.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna get you over here before too long. Trust me, because we're about 20 minutes over or time limit anyway. But so I just want to get a few questions in here, and then we will get all. I will let you go. Um, yeah, I have to be up at 4 o'clock in the morning anyway to go to work tomorrow. So yeah, it's almost my bedtime too. I'm not a kid anymore. So like we talked about before you agreed to come on the show, and um, you know, I don't do the drama. I don't buy into the drama or all that stuff. But for some reason, uh, we have some people lately who seem to be that's their purpose in still being in the field. People that I even used to respect, that I've lost respect about over the last year and a half, 2 years, for many reasons. One has to do with a house that they set up a GoFundMe account to help buy, and then the other one is because they've decided to attack people for no reason. I think they're just trying to remain relevant in the field, is what I think. But anyway, with all that beside, I want to talk a little bit about the legacy of your grandparents. So, and like I said, I'm not going to buy into drama, um, and none of that. So I got like 3 questions about your grandparents, and then I got 2 final questions that I always sign off with, and then we'll get you out of here. Sound good?
Sure.
So millions of people know your grandparents because of the documentaries, books, and everything, and of course, the books. I mean, of course, the movies. And people need to understand the movies are highly fictionalized.
Extreme. Yeah, the cases are real. The details are fake.
Right.
I've only seen one moment that was actually true to life, really true to life. And that's at the end of the second Conjuring movie, where my grandfather takes my grandmother into the backyard and shows her the gazebo he surprised her with. That really happened, and it brought a tear to my eye.
I can understand why. And so watching what
And now I'm assuming that for everybody listening here, the other voice we're hearing is probably your wife in the background.
yeah.
We don't want everybody to start thinking there's a ghost going on around there.
Yeah. Like I said, my temporary studios in my temporary bedroom, because I'm actually fixing up my house next door. So we're staying upstairs at my in-laws' house right now. So there's no air conditioner at my place right now, and it's 110 heat index day. So we're not going to be out there. So here's my bottom line question about your grandparents, and then we'll ask the 2 closing questions, and then we'll get you out of here. So, like I said, we're not going to get into drama. Neither one of us are drama people, and I just want you to tell everybody out there listening, and when we go on all the other places tomorrow, when we get loaded up, just tell everybody what you want everybody to understand about your grandparents' legacy, and that's basically.
My grandparents were human beings. They made mistakes. They made tremendous mistakes, and people got hurt. But they were also people that would drop everything at a moment's notice to help. They were people who constantly were learning themselves, and they didn't have anyone to teach them. They did it purely because they wanted to be helpful. And they did it for decades without anybody knowing they existed. And then it wasn't until the 70s that all of a sudden people started knowing about them. Once they did, yes, the publicity helped them to be known. And that meant they could help even more people. I think that was a problem for a while, especially for my grandfather. But at the end of the day, they were people who truly cared, and they were trailblazers. And I am so lucky to have had them as my first 2 teachers. I've had dozens of other great teachers over the years from many different disciplines. I've even had the pleasure of spending a long weekend with the Dalai Lama. And all of those people have contributed to my understanding But none of it would be possible without my grandparents first.
Appreciate that, and that's what I say to people all the time. I'm like, it don't make any difference what side of the fence you're on. I'm like, honestly, there shouldn't even be a side of the fence anymore. But people have to understand, none of us that investigates today would be here if it wasn't for your grandparents. I mean,
The problem I see is people want to either put them up on a pedestal or knock them off of a pedestal. And no one is a hero. Everyone is human. Everyone has made mistakes. Everyone. And if you're judged by the worst thing you ever did, and that's it, nobody is the worst day they ever lived. We've all had much better days. And that's just not a fair ruler for a lifetime of work and service. My grandparents were good people, and I love them.
okay, so here's
Shouldn't I?
last two questions. So we discussed my word earlier. My kind of signature word is para-pop culture. I think we understand what the para-pop culture is. So my question is, and this is a question I ask everybody because I think it's an important question. I think it's explains part of the drama we have nowadays in the field. But what effects do you think the para-pop culture has had on the field, both negatively and positively?
I can't think of anything positive. All it's done is increase people's fear and misunderstanding of the paranormal. And that's the only reason I'm out in public today. I'm here to change the conversation. I'm working with a producer now to create a paranormal travel program similar to Anthony Bourdain, where we go into culture, we learn from them. I'm not there to teach, I'm there to learn. And present that information to the world so that we get a better understanding of not only how the paranormal manifests, but how different cultures view the paranormal and deal with the paranormal. To me, education overcomes fear, and fear is the real enemy. When we face our fears, we can free ourselves.
I like that. Yeah, and I mean, we've talked off and on for a while, but over the last week and a half, and especially tonight, we've actually became friends, and I'm actually honored to include you as one of my people, and I'm actually from now on you're going to be one of the people that I pick your brain. You're going to be like part of my inner circle, so just get used to that. So final question is, what would your one piece of advice be to somebody just getting into the paranormal field?
Learn first. Learn psychology. Don't watch YouTube and TikTok and other crap. Don't watch paranormal TV shows. There are better sources out there. Start, and God, this is going to sound egotistical as hell. Start by reading my research. It's free, for goodness sake. I'm giving it away. It's on my website, chrismckinnell.com, because I think that knowledge shouldn't be hoarded. It's something that we're supposed to share. And my knowledge comes from so many other studies, not just my own experience. So I want people to learn from it and then use that. Learn about psychology. Learn about how to talk to somebody in crisis. Learn how to manage a person's fears and anxieties, how to empower them, and never, ever, don't you dare go into a case and label something as a demon or evil or whatever, and then walk away. Because all you've done is you've created a perfect storm for that family to manifest something truly terrifying, and you can hurt them.
Great. So, Chris, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's been an absolute pleasure getting the opportunity not only to talk to you about your grandparents, but about learning more about your work and your ideas surrounding the consciousness and nature of reality. Before we go, is there anything that we haven't talked about tonight that you would like the people to know, and tell them where to promote your website again, and tell them where to get all that awesome information? And so this is your chance. The floor is yours, Chris.
Well, if you're in trouble and you need help, go to warrenlegacyfoundation.com. Go to the Contact Us page, and we're right there. We're there to help. That's most important. Our services are free and confidential. If you want to learn more, then go to chrismckinnell.com, and you'll find plenty. If there are people here listening in England, Ireland, Scotland, or Wales, I will be there in October and November doing a lecture tour, and I hope you come visit. I would love to see you.
All right. Thanks everybody watching and listening. Thank you for spending part of your evening with us. Remember, you can catch Paranormal Addicts Podcast live on Facebook and YouTube the next day. Podcast, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and anywhere you podcast. I am Kent Wilson, and this has been another episode of the Paranormal Addicts Podcast. Real investigators, real people, real talk. Until next time, hunt ghosts, not drama.